Welcome to the Friday Power Lunch, a weekly show amplifying the voices of the Virginia grassroots. Each week, we provide engaging conversations about politics, culture, and women making change. Produced by the unstoppable women of Network Nova, our motto is, when we vote, we win. The Friday Power Lunch is recorded before a live Zoom audience. Follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and show us some love and become a sponsor through Patreon. The Friday Power Lunch. Badass women getting things done.
All right, I hope you're all settled in because we have a great way to start the new year, great guests. But you know, if you're new to the room and you Substack, welcome. You are a subscriber and part of this great community. And what we love to do is we love to dance in the room to get ourselves energized up. So today's opening video is Nina Simone, Feeling Good. So we want to get that queued up. So we have your dancing shoes on and let's feel some good today. Go ahead.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel.
Ooh, yeah, it's a new day to start with some swagger with that song. Not the usual high tap dancing song we like, but it really is the mood of this week as we sort of roll into the new year. And I think it's a good reminder of the beauty of everyday tasks that we get caught up in the front page news. And what's really happening is from the attack we saw this week, the two attacks, different things going on, unhinged leadership. These can just drive us, up the wall, especially as activists that want to act immediately or try to figure it out. And sometimes this new day, new dawn, new era, we have to be able to manage ourselves in a way that we do stay really productive, right? So sometimes taking beauty in that, everyday tasks, the things we do for each other, simple things like making a big pot of soup for somebody, going to the aquarium, Lynlee, right? Lynlee Thorne today is here with us. Jess Piper is ready to go, and we have our whole team. So first thing for New Year's resolutions, I want to say thank you. Robin Warner's been on this show for 5 years. This is our 5th season, but she is going to be moving on, never leaving us, but sort of, stepping down from her larger role on the team. She's here today supporting us, and we want to just give a big thank you and double snaps for Robin and all that she's done and will continue to do as part of Network Nova. And I just want to also just wish everybody a happy new year. And as we roll into it, we want to make sure we come out firing in a good way. So thank you for being here. And if you subscribe to Substack, we want to also make sure that you know that we're going to be on that platform. You're going to get emails that way. And we just want to make sure that we keep growing and expanding. And that's our New Year's resolution, is to never stay stagnant. And we really don't. We always are bringing it. So we're so glad that we're together for this New Year's time. But first, if you're new to the room, we always do show business. And I want to make sure that you are in your best behavior. I saw some people come in the chat wishing Happy New Year already. Awesome, especially from Shenandoah and different places. I know Judith is here from San Francisco. Hello, my friend. And friends from all over the state, nation are here today joining us for the new year. So awesome. But use the chat. We love to communicate. We keep it open and friendly. If you misbehave, the big boss there will just kick your butt out, no problem. And today we continue the growth of the community of the After Chat. And Jess Piper and Lynlee Thorne, well, Lynlee may need to move on, but Jess for sure will be here to join us into some really deep dive of the discussions we want to get into today. So stick around for that. We turn off the recording and we stick together as community. And thank you to our patrons. We have that's one series that you can support us financially. Welcome to our newest supporters. We have Rosemary O'Neill, Gilda Johnson, and Alexandra Woods. What 3 wonderful women. Thank you for supporting us. It means so much. We can look at that account, afford our Zoom, do what we need to do, and it just warms our heart. So thank you for that support, and you can do that. And we'll put those links in the chat. Thank you. And to follow us on Substack. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. You could always complain later and unsubscribe if it becomes too much and unwieldy. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So let's get it started today. Happy New Year, everybody. You are on the Friday Power Lunch, and it is by Network Nova Live. And I'm Catherine White, Your host, one of the hosts, Fennell Norton, is here today with us, and we bring you the guests, the issues, the actions, all in one place to get things done and kick some butt, have some fun. That's what we do. Today's theme, New Year's resolutions. I bet you have some. I've already broken about 2 of mine already. But today from Rural Badasses, it's a new day and it's a new way. And from their perspective, we're going to get some good conversation started. Jess Piper, give a wave up there, Executive Director, Blue Missouri, Substack author from The View from Rural Missouri. And she is just an amazing human being. So I'm so glad that she's here today. Also, I want to welcome in the room Lynlee Thorne, the political director, for Rural GroundGame, and the fearless leader of the Virginia Grassroots Coalition, Luisa Boyarski. Happy New Year to you, Luisa. Just come back. Some of us are getting rested up and coming back from vacation, so our heads are all a little cloudy. So I'm glad to have an unclouded, very fresh person to come up and talk to me for the new year. My bestie friend, Fennell Norton, how are you feeling? Is it a new day for you, or what's going on?
Hey, I have to tell you, I have to talk about the song because I think it's just so amazing. It sort of makes the hair on my neck stand up. And it's really because we know that music really is part of activism. And,
Right.
Many of us have sort of been in a place of, I won't call it despair, but I'll say unhappiness. And at some point, you got to let that go. You have to let that go and you have to start looking ahead. And when I hear that, it gives me the push that I need. It gives me the permission structure that I'm looking for to say, hey, a lot of good things are happening too. And if we're going to push forward in 2025, we have got to start feeling good about the things that we've done and the things that we're going to do. And so I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, I was watching a clip for Jeff Bridges was on a night show, and he was talking about his way forward. And it was really interesting to hear from Jeff Bridges about how he felt, going through the grieving process. Also it's thinking, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And he goes, I'm just going to be courageous as I move forward. And he talked about being prepared, always prepared, and also doing good and joining communities where you have like-minded ideas about what that looks like, right? Like,
yeah, we'll get to talk about this. And I love that you said joining communities where you're like-minded, but also looking for places where you're not. And so that will be really exciting when we talk to Jess today, because she goes to a lot of places and a lot of those places aren't like-minded. So I think there's a lot to be said. But when we were chatting about this in your way forward, you were talking about the passing of former President Jimmy Carter. And I want you to talk about that because I thought what you said was really powerful.
Yeah, I wish I could remember, but I will, because I was on the phone today with somebody who served with him in the White House, and to get some inside perspective. And the point that this person brought up that I'm hoping to interview next week was just the contrast in leadership, right? That I think at these moments, and you have somebody that lived his life in service as a real public servant to show us what that's like. He really showed us what service looks like, right? And I think we also have to sort of push back when other people want to frame up good Democrats like Jimmy Carter as the worst president ever. I think really these are things that get sort of said and out there and confirmed, and they really aren't. I think that this is where you look at this man's legacy, what he did. I remember as a kid how he had the solar panels on that roof. Do you remember that? People made fun of him and the little sweater he wore. I think he challenged us in such different ways. And I don't think Washington was a friendly place for him. But for me, it's how I live my life. Jimmy Carter, Johnny Cash, Jesus Christ. It's sort of like JC. Sort of like the JC.
Well, Catherine,
yeah.
As we start to think about innovation, and there was one of the quotes that you said,
Right.
We must adjust to changing times and still hold on to unchanging principles.
That's right. Yes. No, there's no doubt about that. Jimmy Carter, I think he'll be laid to rest next week. People may be going down there Tuesday. I think it's the ceremony starts, and on Thursday in the National Cathedral, they'll lay him to rest. And, I think when we see again, if you all remember in the room, remember when John McCain died and that Trump never went to the funeral. And it'd be interesting to see. It seems to not change. And I think, it's not like you could shame these people into feeling like, oh, here's a guy that had a legacy, did good, and why don't you be more like him? I think, in fact, we're going into a time where America is really kind of changing. And this is the challenge, really, of where we move forward in that. What does it look like? And then trying to create, really working hard to create, sort of that better world that somebody like Jim Carter did it through service, right?
Yeah, I think so. And, we'll always say that history is a lesson for us. And
Yes.
so they let you know the things that you can do over, and they let you know the things that you should not repeat. And but there is a way forward by looking at history. So
Yeah, well, I hope so. I mean, like one thing you said, like the one thing that the human attributes of goodness and truth can overcome great power, and we're gonna see if that's possible, right? That we can really sort of counter what's going on with that hope of how we can really thrive. So I don't know. Wait, do you want to talk about some New Year's resolutions or that you have made, or?
yeah, I'll give you mine, which is, and I'll have to explain it to you, is punching up and even.
That's right.
And so it's punching up and even, along with meeting people where they are. And so you sort of laughed at me when I said punch up, because and someone said, "Oh, you mean when they go low, you go lower?" And I
Like,
said,
no.
"No, when they go low, I go even." So I think part of it is recognizing that it will require an amount of courage to do some of the things that we haven't done before. And I do think that this is time to use the word fight, because what we are fighting for is so incredibly important that I don't intend to go into a gunfight with a knife. I intend to fight.
Holly go lovely, that like gorgeous little black dress. I feel like having more fun at the party, definitely a New Year's resolution. Not that I haven't, but keep that fun side of me going. Challenge myself to take new risks, new challenges, new technology, taking on this role for the Power Lunch and Substack. It was so scary to write that Substack and start that first article. And I'm like, geez, I can do this. And but it took me a while, and I did it, and then it wasn't so scary. So I think, as activists that, really keep challenging ourselves. I love to meet people and talk about that. I love to meet older people. And my grandma, who was 72, became a writer at 72. She lived to be 98. She goes, "What am I going to do with the next 30 years of my damn life? I'm going to learn how to write." So challenge yourself, do something new, learn how to open a Zoom, get in the back room. My grandma was really an inspiration to me when I saw her doing all this stuff at 90. She just bossed the world. So I think for me, just challenging myself and being good in that space. And also laughing at you, because when we were talking about our theme for the Women's Summit this year, by the way, mark your calendars, everybody. We'll get into it more because we have some guests lined up. It's a Women's Summit. It's organized by women, open to everybody, June 27th and 29th. Judith, book your freaking tickets now. I know you live in California. You came last year, nationwide. We had activists come from all over, but we'll be at Tyson's Corner at a different hotel we'll have more conference breakouts, workshops, and all that good stuff. And, a couple of days of just some badass, learning, good times, because we got to really break some of the media. We got to learn about how to communicate. We have so much to do. But when I said to you, what's the theme? You're like, I don't want to do some normal things like, let's do this together and move on. You're like, I want to punch, and I want to get at it. So good for you. So with that said,
so I wanted to say this, Catherine. So I am in a hotel today. So if I freeze up a little, you guys just keep on talking. But that's what's happening. So just know that.
Well, I'll be there holding you from behind, right? But let's get on to it. I think people are here to listen to Jess Piper. Again, if you're listening in, Jess Piper, Executive Director of Blue Missouri, Substack author of The View from Rural Missouri. We're going to talk with her. Fennell's going to talk with her first, and then we're going to roll in. Oh, you know what I forgot?
Luisa.
Luisa Boyarski. I'm so sorry. Let's bring Luisa up and let's get at it. That's my bad, because I'm reading my notes and I missed the next ones. Okay, Luisa, let's spotlight her up, and we'll bring up Fennell. We could keep Fennell on too.
Hello, ladies.
Hi, hi, Luisa. Thank you for being here, and I hope you're well rested and Happy New Year. And I wanted to bring you some kibasi and sauerkraut as good luck. So,
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Well, as you know, in Virginia, we never rest and we have a lot going on as the start of the year begins. So I wanted to share a number of ways to get involved and use activism therapy to get you ready for this coming year that will be very, very busy in Virginia. So I know you've heard about this before, but we have our Get Out the Vote effort going for the January 7th special elections. The Democratic majority in the state house and Senate lie in the balance with these elections. So it is so critical that if you do anything over the next week, find some way to start talking to voters who are going to be voting in these special elections. So the reason they're so important is that we need the majority in the House and Senate to pass our 3 constitutional amendments this year. And these amendments are going to protect the rights of Virginians, the right to control one's reproductive functions, the right to marry the person you love, and the right to vote for people, or the right to vote for people who have been formerly convicted of felonies, who've served their time and paid their debt to society. So these are rights that all Virginians should have, and we have the opportunity to take that first step in making them constitutional amendments this year. The governor can do nothing about it. So all we need to do is make sure that we get our Democrats elected in these special elections this week. So there are 3 candidates for us to support. You met 2 of them in December during the Power Lunch. Cannon, who's running for state Senate, and JJ running for state House. They have a coordinated campaign to get out the vote in Loudoun County in their area. I will put it in the chat, but I know that there have already been a number of links that went in about opportunities to canvass, phone bank, and greet voters on January 4th and 7th will be the time for the greetings. They will have a rally this weekend with Senator Kaine. They have canvas launches with Congresswoman Spanberger and McClellan, among many others. So really fun opportunities to get out and talk to voters early this year. We also have a Democratic candidate for Senate in Virginia 10. Jack Trammell is a teacher and an educational leader who's been working really hard visiting local committees, attending events, hiring staff, and fundraising in his bid to flip this important Senate seat. Trammell decided to run because he insists that a 2-party system only works if we have viable candidates on both sides. That ensures everyone's voice is heard before votes are cast. This will be a much more difficult seat for us to win. However, as we all know, in a special election, it is all about turnout because the numbers of voters will be quite low. So if we can make sure that the Democrats turn out, it could be a surprise victory. So I'm also going to put into the chat opportunities to canvass, phone bank, and donate for Jack's campaign. Of course, what we also have coming up next week is the General Assembly is going to be kicking off on January 8th. And this is going to be a shorter session. However, there's a lot that our legislators want to accomplish. We'll be talking more about our priority legislation next week at the Virginia Grassroots Coalition press conference, which will be happening during the Power Lunch. So I hope you can all join. And yesterday I was chatting with our legislative working group members that this year really does feel different than the first time Trump was elected. We are much more confident about our strategies to advocate for legislation, and we have really strong relationships with many of our state senators and delegates. We've been meeting with them over the past month, and those conversations have been incredibly productive and have been much more conversational and strategic than early on when we were meeting with them, and it just felt a little bit more performative and sharing of information, but not a whole lot of strategy. Now we're really digging into those details of how can we be most successful, 1, during session, but 2, how can we also use session as an opportunity to message about what Democrats are trying to accomplish for Virginians, because this is going to be critical for us to win the elections this fall. So I'm going to put in the chat multiple opportunities for us to support our legislators during the General Assembly session. There are some trainings coming up. There's some opportunities to go down to Richmond to show support over the next week. And we have got a lobby day already on justice reform coming up on January 9th. So all of that is going to go into the chat. Please, please, if you can, join in person or virtually if that is an option. the more that we can be in the room supporting this work, the better. We also have federal calls to action, which Dennis and others have been spearheading on behalf of the coalition. And so I want to remind you to please continue to track those calls to action and respond to them. They're listed on the coalition's website, and I can put that link in the chat as well. So there'll be calls to action coming out then, both from the federal level and from the state General Assembly over the course of the next couple of months. Again, we've heard from our legislators how critically important it is for them to receive those emails and phone calls, because they need them as backing. They need to be able to say, look, I heard from more people asking me to vote for this or sometimes against this than from the other side, because they're always going to hear from people who don't agree with what our legislative priorities are. And so we need to make sure that they're getting the backing from us to be able to say, yes, I can make that vote. And that won't hurt me in the election this fall, because I can say my constituents asked me to do that. So very important to continue to let them know what your priorities are. And then finally, if you want to dive deeper on the legislative session, please join us on Sunday, January 12th at 6 p.m. on Zoom for our monthly Virginia Grassroots Coalition meeting. And if you want to join us, I'll put my email in the chat and you can just send me an email to give you the Zoom link. So lots going on as usual, but really, really excited about this upcoming General Assembly session. We have been hearing about some of the fantastic bills that we'll go into more detail next week, but our Democrats are really, really on top of things and are on the ball, and we're excited to be able to support them and also help spread the message of the good work they're doing.
Yes, I want to make sure that Fennell's not frozen.
Oh,
I'm not frozen.
She went away. Luisa jumped away. Luisa, first of all, I can't wait till next week. We're going to have a great show. Luisa will be spearheading with the Grassroots Coalition, as she said. And also, this election, I'm interested to see if people are really paying attention, and we need to make sure we win those seats at the special elections, because that will guarantee that we have a better way forward. So I'm going to let you get at it. Thank you, Luisa, for that update.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks
okay.
for coming in the chat as we speak.
Oh, good.
Good.
All right, go. I'm going to leave and go ahead and bring.
Yes. So, Catherine, you know how excited I am to have Jess Piper with us today. And again, for you guys, Jess Piper is the executive director at Blue Missouri, and she is a magnificent writer. And she has a Substack, The View from Rural Missouri. And so I am so excited, Jess, to have you here. I have a cousin who listens to us, and she says, "Oh, Jess has been here before." So just know that you are a celebrity in our presence. And so we're so happy to have you.
I'm literally a no one from nowhere, but I so appreciate every single one of you. I appreciate what you guys do. You really do make things happen. I mean, you talk the talk and then you walk the walk. And I really do appreciate every single person on this call and you ladies who do this every single week. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. So here's the thing. So we've been chatting about the new year, and you wrote a piece, and Catherine repeats it all the time. How are you going to be this year? How are you going to handle 2025? And you said, I am going to be insufferable.
It's true. It's true. A lot of people, I put that out on social media and people are like, yeah, so like you normally are, right? And I'm like, heck yeah, that's right. I am completely insufferable to the GOP. And like you were saying, Fennell, I mean, I wake up every day and I, punch up every single day, figuratively punch them in the mouth every single day, let everybody know what these folks are about and what they're doing.
Yeah, you told us very, very early on, you said, should these people get in, all you need to do is look at red states to see what it's going to be like. And so I think that just in understanding what it's going to be like, we need to understand how you're supposed to fight and what you're supposed to do. So talk a little bit about, how you wake up and how you fight. So talk a bit about that.
So I do live in Missouri. We have a GOP supermajority. We've had a trifecta for, the state and the Senate for 22 years now. So, I would go out. I ran for office. For those who don't know, I was a teacher for 16 years, and then I ran for office. I had to quit my teaching career because in Missouri, you can't be a teacher and run for office, and that's super convenient, right? 66,000 well-qualified people are kept out of politics. But so I ran for office, and I would knock doors, and I would hear people say, the Democrats, blaming things on the Democrats. And I finally realized, I was like, what Democrats, friends? There's not one Democrat elected statewide. Who are you talking about? And then there was this disconnect because people are watching national news. They're watching Fox all the time. And so they're under this impression that Missouri is being led by Democrats. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And so once I figured out that disconnect, then I really started pointing out representatives like mine. I would say, you know what? My representative took a whole bunch of max out donations from school choice people. Why would he do that? And then if I talk to my neighbors about the fact that he's, not going to support our schools, that makes them go, well, wait, why would he not support our schools? And so it's a constant, education. But how I draw attention to it is by being very specific. Jeff Farnan voted for this. Rusty Black voted for this, and letting people know exactly who their representatives are and how they're voting.
So, Jess, Linda Hershon would love you because you do exactly what she says, which is to make injustice public, which means that you really have to show people what's happening. We were talking earlier about some of the tactics, some of the things that you do. And you told a story to us about a Republican meeting that was happening. And you drove and you went to that meeting. So let everybody know that this is courageous, Jess, what you did and how it turned out.
Well, that actually happens a whole lot here because I'm surrounded by Republicans. So any space I'm in, I'm basically, going to be in a Republican space. And I can't remember what meeting that was exactly because I've attended so many. But I will say this, and that's people. I'm on Blue Sky now. I left Twitter. Twitter, has become what it was. And so I'm on Blue Sky and people didn't know who I was. Why would they, right? And I realized when I would talk about being rural that people would jump on me. Liberals were very upset about me living in a rural space, right? Because I'm adjacent to Trump voters. And so a lot of that is working with people who assume that we're all Trump voters out here. When I ran, I got my butt kicked, but I got 25% of the vote. So that means 1 in 4 people in my area will vote for a progressive. I mean, I talked about abortion. I talked about free college, terrible things like that. And the fact that LGBTQ people should have, the rights that the rest of us do. So we're always in Republican spaces where I am. I'll tell you a real quick story. I had a rim on my tire was messed up, and I ended up going to a tire shop in Iowa because I was going to speak somewhere. So I was sitting in this tire shop, and it's full. The whole tire shop is full, and they are playing AM radio. And by the way, I talked about this today, but most combines and tractors only have AM capabilities. So people who are in tractors and combines all day listen to AM radio all day long, right? So I'm sitting in this tire shop and they're talking about Trump's picks. They're talking about, what he's going to do for farmers. They're talking about how he's going to take our country back. And I was sitting there like my head was going to explode. And then I looked around at everybody else and they're just like, yeah, because this is what they hear all day long, because this is what is out in this area. I saw a study today that talked about people in news deserts, which is, generally rural spaces. 91% of the voters in media deserts voted for Trump. 91%. And all of this is coming back to something that has been happening in front of our eyes for a long time. Journalism is dying. Small town news organizations are closing. People are getting their news from national, Facebook, that stuff like that. And so we're in these information silos. And that's why I think it's so hard when people want to say, all Trump voters are this or that. And you can look around and go, my neighbor isn't this or that, but they only heard one message. They didn't hear anything else. I do have local newspapers, but guess what? They give space to every single one of my Republican representatives every week. So they hear the same
Mhm.
thing from people they know, their representatives, right?
Yeah, and so we talked about that a little bit, Jess, because we talked about, so how do we sort of break through this? And you and I were chatting about, well, if you don't turn me on your radio and you don't put me on your TV and you don't read the newspaper, what you can read and what you can't stop is reading that billboard when you pass by. You got to
Yes.
see some of those messages. So I think we do have to go back to some of the different kinds of strategies and reinvent what they're like to figure out how we get into some of these spaces. So what are your thoughts? Because what I think is that it's probably working in Missouri a lot better than you think. When you say, 1 in 4 voters voted for you, just imagine with resources what that could look like with different kinds of information getting through. So what are you thinking about as you move forward for 2025?
What I know is that there are organizers like me in every space, in every rural space. But we as Democrats have walked away from these spaces because they're very difficult. And what we try to do as Democrats is say, we'll win the suburbs, we'll win the cities, and then don't worry about the rest of it. It'll all, come out in the wash. And friends, we found out that is not true. 33% of Missouri is rural. We can't move forward without pulling these folks along with us, right? So there are organizers there. We have to find them and we have to fund them and we have to help them by having, boots on the ground. But you were talking about the billboard. That is so right because there's something you can't avoid seeing it. And I was telling you a story about a young woman in St. Joseph, Missouri, where we have a company called the Herzogs that are taking our tax money and sending it to private religious schools. This woman is in her late 20s. She started a PAC, and the whole reason she did this PAC is so that she could put up a billboard. This Herzog Foundation was also on Project 2025. They were
Mhm.
working behind the scenes. And so she put this huge billboard on 29 South at St. Joe heading towards to Kansas City. And it said, the Herzog Foundation wants to take away your Medicare and your Social Security. And then she put the page number for Project 2025 on it. And everybody I know was like, who did this? Oh my God, did you see this? Did you see this? And so it just started something in people's head, right? Where they're like, wait, the Herzog Foundation is doing that? Yes, they are. And so she was very specific in pointing out the player. And like you said earlier, I name them. I call them out by name, which is why sometimes when I go to Walmart, people go down a different aisle.
But
I hate that woman.
I, so that really is funny about calling them out. But I think there's something else that you talk about that's really, really powerful. And it was in one of your wonderful Substack articles. And you were just giving sort of these really important statistics about where Missouri was. It's 50th in this. We're using books from 2008 to talk a little bit about that. Because when people hear that, Democrat Republican goes out the window because now you're thinking about your family. So can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, and that was a big part of when I was knocking on doors. Missouri is 50th in starting teacher pay, 49th in educational funding. We are 7th in gun violence, 4th in accidental gun violence. And so when you say these things out loud, there is no other party to point to, right? We are 50th in starting teacher pay because the Republicans went down there and they want to send your tax money to private religious schools. So they have quit funding your teacher pay and your schools. And I gave a very definitive, graphic with that. The picture of my daughter's social studies book that didn't know we elected a Black president, didn't know there was Hurricane Katrina, right? So when you give them this fact, there's nothing they can't deny it, right? And so when you give people these facts, it's a cognitive dissonance, right? I'm
Mhm.
standing at the door. I don't look like what Fox News said I'm supposed to be, right? There's no horns on my head, right? And I also taught your nephew and your grandson, that I'm not that sort of person who, is out to hurt children. And so that's what you do, and that's why you have to have people on the ground. And that's why it's so important because Fennell, I don't know if you've seen this, but there is data from the Brookings Institute that says if we can just move 3% rural voters to voting for Democrats, we can change national elections. I don't have to win, but I can help get people to the voting booth. And that's what happened in Missouri. We are still under this last election. We're still under a GOP supermajority, but we legalized abortion. We had a complete abortion ban. How did that happen? We had people on the ground who didn't win their own race, but pushed up the engagement. It's bottom up, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So at this point, I am going to bring up Lynlee Thorne with us to talk a little bit because you guys are talking, the things that you're saying, obviously it must be true. I have this, she was an older lady and she was like 95 and she would wear her little high heel shoes even at 95. And I said, oh my goodness, Ma Westcott, you look so nice. And she would say, so many people say that, so it must be true. So here you guys go. So Lynlee, I'm so glad to have you up. This is Lynlee Thorne. She's the political director for Rural GroundGame. But she doesn't just work in rural spaces. She works wherever she's needed, and she worked across the country in this 2024 election. So Lynlee, happy to have you here with Jess. Let's talk a little bit about 2025 and what you're thinking.
Hi, y'all. Great to see Jess as always, and everyone else. I'm really grateful for this community, and just want to emphasize again how important it is for everybody here today to remember how critical your community is, how important it is to keep showing up in spaces like this, and how much it matters that you personally, whoever you are involved in whatever way that is. For too long, our party has not created pathways to make sure that average people are directly and personally involved in the political process. And so much of the work that we need to do now and forever is to make sure that we're making that more accessible, to really empower people to take charge of their own lives and make their own communities better. So yes, Virginia, again, as Luisa reemphasized, we never get a break, ever. So thank you all for what you're doing to help on these special elections. Rural GroundGame right now is refreshing a lot of our resources directed towards candidates in 2025. A huge piece of that for us is going to be research and candidate recruitment. That's a place where anybody here can be involved, even if you are in the cities and suburbs, part of building community and getting to know each other better, and investing in these spaces.
Oops, I think we just lost Lynlee. Jess, are you still here?
I'm still here.
Okay, so we're gonna keep right on rolling. But Catherine, why don't you come on in and join us too? And
Yeah.
Lynlee will pop back in when she's able to pop in. But Jess, she's saying what you're saying in terms of how we have to invest in our communities, in our rural communities, and it doesn't matter where you sit. So I'm thinking about, Jess, in terms of all of us on this Zoom today, how do we sort of work together more collectively so that we participate in our rural spaces to help them get the support that you need?
Yeah, well, and Lynlee was saying something about candidate recruitment, and that's a really big deal. People will look at rural spaces. You could look at mine, friends. Oh, there she is. She's back.
She's
so
at
keep on
the
going,
aquarium.
Lynlee. Keep on going, Jess, and then Lynlee will pop back in.
Yeah, she's
Okay.
there.
Okay, so running everywhere is the biggest thing. So people will look at rural areas and say they get what they vote for, right? I went and voted in August of this year, and I wasn't, because I pulled a Democratic ballot, I couldn't vote for my state rep or my sheriff or my assessor or my coroner or my prosecutor or any county office because there were no Democrats running. And that's a huge deal that maybe Lynlee can speak to.
Sorry about that. I guess Wi-Fi in Baltimore doesn't work sometimes either. But yeah, Jess is right. The issue with candidate recruitment is kind of multifaceted. One, it shouldn't ever, in my mind, just be about candidate recruitment. We also need to be recruiting into our local Democratic committees, because that's how we can transform our party and build community over the long haul into our party as well. But candidate recruitment is something that is obviously critical. Again, this year we have 100 House of Delegates seats. We have tons of school board seats and Board of Supervisor seats all over the Commonwealth. This is a huge, huge, huge lift. Rural GroundGame has a database that is inclusive of every single district in the country, not just Virginia. This is a holding place for potential candidates, We have over 1,200 candidates, potential candidates here in Virginia identified in that list, and we need folks to hit the phones and call them. We have really great information that our researchers have provided, like what these folks have done in their communities already. These are really, really fun calls because you're talking to incredible human beings who have worked on like planning commissions, who really care a lot about the drainage issues in their communities. And if they care about that, they probably care about what our kids are eating for lunch. They probably care about making sure that we're fighting these bigger fights that we're going to have so many of in the future. So would love to include people in that. We're having our 2025 kickoff call. I'll leave that information in the chat if I can do that once I'm done up here. And also just make you aware of how you can get involved. That'll be the place for that, so people can bring their ideas. And I think going back to the podcast, the radios, the billboards, another big piece for us this year and any year will be to keep building on that collaborative communication piece. So whenever we do a radio ad, and Rural GroundGame did over 6.9 million direct voter contacts and ad impressions in 2024. But we did that with people's help, right? That was volunteer sweat equity at the doors, on our dialer, helping with text. But then when we did our radio ads, our video ads, all of that, our newspaper ads, those were built with people in those communities. These were not parachuted in from a place similar to where I am now. No offense to the folks here, they're very lovely. We're enjoying our time in the city. But these messages have to come from within our communities. And I want to point out something Jess mentioned. And this can be a little uncomfortable in the space of, having liberals together, Democrats together. It is very, very real that I also experience this hostility coming from Democrats very often to raise these issues, to say, hey, I've heard these high-level Democrats in their fancy fundraisers actively out loud talking about neglecting our communities. And that's something you can all help with. I know that is not the vibe here at the Power Lunch, that y'all have been out front on this for a decade now, really pushing that we engage in rural communities, but our party does not. We continue to be at 3% or less of our national investment as a party in rural districts. In Virginia, that's even worse. It's closer to 1.8% of total dollars going into these districts. Money in politics sucks. We need to end Citizens United. It shouldn't even be a thing. But until we win that battle, we have to understand that we need to show up to these fights in a very real way, and not doing so, continuing to not doing so. The best that we've seen so far is some virtue signaling and some nice pats on the backs and some, oh shucks, aren't you cute for getting out there in these rural areas. We need help. We need, like Jess said, all the things. So you're all advocates, I think, for that. You're all speaking to that no matter where you are. And I can assure you it makes a huge difference when you are in a city, when you are in a suburb, when you disrupt a conversation that leaves anybody out, no matter where they live. That changes things because it creates accountability. It changes the conversation. And we're a party. It should be okay for us to have difficult conversations with a little tension as we fight for the world we want to see. That should be allowed. That should be okay. And I just please encourage you to continue speaking up on that.
Yeah. Catherine, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm just listening in here, and I do agree with it. Of course, everything we're saying here. And I'm curious, when we are talking about this now and moving forward in this new environment, I do feel like the things that Jess and Lynlee have learned will help us in this, like I say, this new dawn, this new day. So I'm curious, because what we talked about, Jess, in our pre-chat too, is that how we can't stay in our silos, right? Our information silos, that people, I know Dahlia Lithwick actually talked about this the other day, people go into blue sky, people mute yourself, or okay, thanks. That this is really important to do that, to get out of our silos and be in both places, like in our good communities, and also be out there, talking to people. So we break through that bubble. What are some ideas, Jess, you have, and then Lynlee, you have, about how we're going to break through that bubble? Like, what are we going to do to sort of really make sure our message is hitting people?
It's talking to people. It's having, deep canvassing. It's when I would knock on a door and someone would keep me there for an hour, right? And it's also consistently having candidates. I ran in 2022. There's no one running in 24, right? And so it's constantly a battle to even have someone to vote for. But talking to our neighbors, and like Lynlee was saying, making sure that the people that are sending the message are people that are in the community or understand the community, right? A lot of times we would have, and I've never had my door knocked ever, because they just don't care and they assume if I live here that I'm probably voting red, right? We have to remember one thing: the Republicans aren't in my area either. They're not knocking doors or making calls, but they
Right.
do have 4 churches in my town of 480 people that are telling them how to vote. And so Democrats have really lost that community space, or have ceded it actively. So that's something really to think about, is the churches are doing a lot of work, not all of them, obviously, but they're doing a lot of work for the Republicans.
Yeah, a little propaganda arm, as we say. Lynlee, what are
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, the loss, a lot of people talk about Bowling Alone, which is an excellent book for folks who haven't read it, but just talking, and this gets covered in a lot of different ways, but I very much agree with Jess. We've got to find ways to be in person much more often. And actually, Jess is kind of relevant to why I'm here in Baltimore today. I think it was Jess. We're in this very large group of rural organizers all across the country. Somebody said somewhere in that chat that they were worried about the information that their white sons are being served on the internet, through social media, through TikTok, just the white Christian nationalist agenda to recruit more young white men. I have a 15-year-old son. I'm here in Baltimore today because my son befriended a young man on the internet through gaming about 2 years ago. And he lives just outside of Baltimore. And we met him in person a few months ago. His family, they were absolutely lovely, like absolutely lovely. It was great to come back here yesterday and have hugs, and they had a sleepover. What I want to say is these 2 young men, my son and his friend Mauricio, sitting side by side on the couch, are looking at their social media and things they're served on YouTube specifically, and it is jaw-dropping. Mauricio is a young Black man, my son's a young white man, and they are being served very, very different information. And this is something my son and I talk about all the time. He understands like who he is, his role, and that he is a target for this type of propaganda. So getting out of our silos might look like, how are we holding a tether to people who live in different communities, and then how are we showing up when we can, and this is hard, but like I'm here in person so that they can have FaceTime together, so they can sit on the couch side by side or be here at the aquarium, and have these conversations and not miss them. I see them learning so much from each other, and I see them, and I talked to his mom and grandma, and we're all trying to troubleshoot like what the future looks like and what our responsibility is to each other and to them.
Yeah, Jess. Again, oh, that must be the coffee shop. Oh, Jess, what are your thoughts on that?
On the young men?
Well, just in the sense of the content that gets in front of, it brings to mind another piece that we talked about just in the education piece and the public education and dumbing down people and the content that people are exposed to, right? We saw in this past election, especially how they use the gaming communities to, to go after a certain population.
But those can be a force for good too. And that's where I think Jess had it. Maybe it was Jess. I'm sorry if it wasn't you, Jess, but I know somebody in that large group chat was talking about their children being targeted. And I've seen that too, but sometimes it can be a force for good. And so that's why, having those in-person interactions is really important. I got triggered by something I saw in the chat, and I apologize for bringing this up, but somebody is reading White Rural Rage, and please, by all means, like read whatever book you want to read, but please be mindful. I hate that book. I absolutely detest it.
Why do you hate that book? I love it.
It's more of the same.
I mean, I
it's
don't know
more
that you hate it.
It's incredibly
Pro.
lazy in my view. It is more of the same of being lazy, not willing to dig in and do the hard work of changing minds, of being in the spaces that we're in. One of the places I talk to Republicans the most is at my local dump, like for real. Like we're here sorting metal and trash and having these interactions and conversations about tractors and trucks and like whatever. And you do end up in these political conversations. You do. But if we don't feel like we are part of a larger community that sees this work as critical and important and necessary, and we don't take that responsibility, all of us, it gets hard to do. Not because it isn't important. We should do these things. We should fight the good fight because that's the morally correct way to live a life. But it's hard to do without community behind you. And books like White Rural Rage and this mentality of just cut and run, like screw these people. I gotta ask you, how are you gonna eat? Like, how are y'all going to eat?
So
Let me know. And like, where is your energy gonna come from? Not y'all, but the folks who are bringing this mentality forward. Like, we got to do better than this, y'all, and we can. And I actually encourage you to read that book because it's important for people to see what's being said so you can get maybe what Jess and I are saying about the obstacles that we're facing in our work.
So let me just say two things about that. And I'm sorry I had to step away for a second. So here's what I would say. So my one of the important things in my resolutions for this year is to always recognize that no one's right all the time. That there's always some room for some adjustment in thinking. There's always some room everywhere. And if we do better at that, then we probably get a more holistic picture. So what I would say as a Black woman living in rural spaces, that there is some of that stuff there. So there's always some of it. So you sort of have to figure out how to work through it. And sometimes it is really ugly and unkind. And it can be especially ugly and unkind to people of color in those spaces. So
no doubt.
I just want to put that out there. But I also wanted to say in terms of, how do we communicate through, when we're thinking about 2025, it may be AM radio. It may be more billboards. It may be some things that we haven't even thought of yet because it's going to need all of that. I did see in the chat that Michelle Fornish joined us today. I'm so happy she's here. The Small Deeds Done. She's been on the show before too. And maybe she'll be in the after chat for a while. She's saying hello to everybody. So go ahead, Lynlee.
Yeah. Yes. Jess. So yeah, let's go. With that said, with the wrapping up to a couple minutes here to go over some of our thoughts on facing the new year. With Jess and Lynlee. I am thinking right now, especially and as we head into the end of January, the inauguration, a lot of stuff that we're marching to doesn't feel so good. But at the same time, we have to figure out how to adjust to that. And I do think pointing out, like you said, Jess, it really resonated with me, is we have to point to really the villains are. And I think the billionaires, the class of people, this kind of oligarchy we see forming, we need to make sure we're breaking through and people are really seeing what's being taken from them. I think that, getting into if we saw the bombings the other day, notice that Trump and Elon Musk and that universe went to say it was immigrants. It was people crossing the border. This is all intentional distraction. And also we know that means going forward, our president, the elect is going to be not a source of any kind of integrity like when we brought up Jimmy Carter. So I think we do have some challenges as we move into it. And to figure out how to make sure that we are telling people what exactly is happening to them and why not, 50, most of the wealth has gone to the 1% these last 30 years under Republican, the idea of trickle down. So I love that. So with that, that's kind of my point of view as I try to figure out those challenges. So I wonder, Jess, starting with you about some of your challenges you're seeing and maybe some of those resolutions that you thought about you'd like to share.
It's really heartbreaking that we didn't win the presidency, but I have been saying this for a couple of years. It doesn't matter that much in my space who won the presidency, because I'm still under a GOP supermajority. I still have an abortion ban. They're still banning books. My roads are terrible. If I meet a combine on the road, I'm in trouble, right? There's no place to go. They're closing our hospitals. Women who are willfully and want to be pregnant are having to drive an hour and a half to find a hospital to deliver. And so it's really at this point, it really is the message. It's not necessarily, red versus blue anymore. It's the oligarchs versus the rest of us. And we can point to that. And I'll tell you something about rural spaces. They love Bernie Sanders. They will eat up Bernie Sanders. So they're like Trump or Bernie. I don't know. I like them both. So we have to remember that very progressive policies are very popular, right? Missouri has medicinal weed and recreational weed, while we had an abortion ban, because people will put this on the ballot and they'll vote for it. Now we don't have an abortion ban. We raised our minimum wage. We gave people guaranteed sick time, and then we vote for Trump, right? So this is it seems like things are topsy-turvy, but they're not when we get it down to the basics. Friends, it's the rich folks against the rest of us. It really is that class war. And you and I'm a Democrat and you're a Republican. We're still working class people. So the thing we need to do is come together, right? And so that's really what I work for, and what I'm working toward. And reading books, actual books.
Lynlee.
Yeah, Jess is absolutely right. And I think an important part of that, especially as we're looking at things within our own party, where we need to really confront the oligarchy inside our own Democratic coalition. We've got, monopoly power that right at the very center of the functioning of our own party that we need to confront and disrupt. And it's not something that I hear the folks running for DNC chair talking about openly. I assume that they're certainly talking about it somewhere, but it's something that we need to confront as we look for the future changes in leadership in our own party. We've got to take this seriously, because people can sniff inauthenticity from miles and miles away. And unfortunately, that's why we lost a lot of folks when we can get them back on our side. But when it becomes unclear to folks, whose side we're on, these fights get much harder.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the DNC. We are in contact trying to get them on the show, and I hope I can announce that, and we will be able to ask those questions. I so agree with you. I think that is one of a good challenge for all of us in here, to make sure that we are pushing up our thoughts on this. And, whoever these elite people at the top that make these decisions, I think we got to make sure that things change, and not just change, but we just reorganize how we feel this structure that we're in works. I don't even understand it myself. So thank you.
Can I add one last thing? I apologize. We're doing our listening tour. Rural GroundGame is doing a listening tour all over Virginia. Folks can help in a lot of different ways. I'll make sure that people have a link to add questions. We've been getting questions from people that they want to just ask how we can make the party better, how we can make our work stronger. So I'll make sure you have that as well. And we'll be out doing this in small groups and one-on-one conversations January through April.
Yeah, I could talk. We'll talk in the after chat more, because I'm also watching how it already is happening, the power structures within our party, how it's already working on these elections coming up. So we have a lot to say. So Fennell, why don't you wrap this up, and then
thank you. I want to just thank Jess and Lynlee, who are both just so amazing. I just love them to death. I hope, Jess, that you can stay for a little while. Lynlee, please, I know you can't stay for long, but if you could just stay for a few minutes, it would make my heart really happy. And I know Michelle Hornish is out there, so if she can stay for a little bit for the after chat, that would be really great too. So with that, we're going to say goodbye to Jess and Lynlee.
Bye, in the after chat, Lynlee. And make sure that we see some manatees at the aquarium over there, right?
Yeah.
But that said, I want to say something. I was in the Outer Banks last week, and a humpback whale came up on the beach.
Ooh.
And yeah, it was something else to witness. This huge, beautiful animal, and boy, was it was sad too. They buried it in the sand there, but it was magnificent. We're on a planet Earth, Everybody stand back under the stars and look up. Take that time to feel good by knowing that, boy, when I was at the beach looking up at that sky, I was like, holy crap, we are on this planet spinning around and we're a bit crazy down here.
But that's okay. We're going to do our part.
We're going to do our part. So let's wrap up and welcome people that if you joined us from Substack, this is the 5th season, first episode. Next week, we'll have Luisa Boyarski back from the Virginia Grassroots Coalition with us. And she will be having all the issue leaders of the coalition on to talk about priority bills. And we'll be talking about the election. Virginia, all eyes on us this year because we want to make sure we punch back, punch up, punch at, and work on our shit and make ourselves really better and strong and everything in community. So Women's Summit, mark your calendars, and we're going live. You can buy your ticket now. Early bird is $169. Early bird for a 2-day more event. And the regular ticket will be $199, but you'll have a chance till March 1st to buy that ticket at $169. And then we'll have a super saver around Mother's Day. We'll run that for till Mother's Day, and that'll be at $189. And then after that, we'll just be in our regular price. So we love early bird. We make sure our tickets allow everybody to come. We have scholarship available. We have elected tickets. It's a little more expensive. If you're elected official, you should be paying more because you pay for the scholarship that we're giving to people to come. And we also have candidate tickets because we are going to make sure that we have all the resources our candidates need. And folks that are coming from all over, you can adopt a candidate. You can meet them at the freaking Women's Summit. We will have position papers. We're going to have people come in to help candidates. And if you're running for school board, you're still a candidate. If you're running next year, then the year after, you need to come to the summit and start to build up your muscles now to be prepared and to get ready. And lastly, make sure you continue to follow us on Substack and know that we will be communicating with you on our platform and receiving emails that way. But you can always reach us if something's not working. Did I forget anything? You're going to say thank you.
Did not forget anything. That
Did
was
you
perfect.
good? I
Flawless.
did. Okay. Wow. I made it. Okay. I'm just trying to think. Oh, Patrons. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We had 3 new ones this year, this last month. Please, let's get a few more today. Put a little bit of patron love in our pocketbook. It really helps us. And because our subscription on Substack is free at the moment. So we want to make sure that we still are rolling. All right. Dennis, do you want to get our ending credits ready? And
Let's roll
thank
the
you
credits.
to the team. We love you. And let's roll. Happy New Year. It was really great to see you in the room today. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next week, January 10th at the same time. Tune in then. Bye-bye.